Hello, you're watching The Right Stuff, an outreach of the Writer's Block, Inc. And we are grateful to PAC 14 for giving us this opportunity to do this show. PAC 14 is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Beverly Lynch. She is a member of the Writer's Block, and she is a published author. Good morning.
Good morning, Yanni. I don't know if I can follow that.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into writing.
Well, I've done it ever since I was about 13 or 14, when I'd write notes to other kids in my class, usually nasty things about the teachers. And I kept journals off and on. And as we talked earlier, I would put things in my journal that I couldn't say to people. But I also just like to write stories and things. And my husband is a commercial fisherman, and when I was writing my journal, he'd come home and he'd tell me these fantastic stories, scary stories, thrillers, and hilarious stories, and I'd start writing them in my journal with my stuff, which was comparatively boring. And as the years passed, I realized that the government was really starting to put the fishermen out of business. And I thought, nobody's talking about this. You don't hear it on TV or in the newspapers. And like I said, separated my journals. I started putting his stuff in a separate book. And I said, I have enough for a book, but my writing style is just a journal, Sometimes I'm in present tense, sometimes I'm in past tense. It's all over the place. So I heard about the Writer's Block. I said, I'll get to meet some friends, maybe learn a little something about writing. And I got some marvelous free advice from this lady. And it really helped a lot.
So you enjoy going to the Writer's Block and talking with everybody and having your work critiqued and the various things that writers need to do. Mm-hmm. Give me a couple examples of stories that your husband told you.
Well, gosh, I don't know where to begin. I got 350 pages of them here, and that's not even all of them. Okay.
Wet and Hungry, an Atlantic Fisherman's Life. So in it talks about the watermen. Is that right?
Well, we call them commercial fishermen. Watermen are more for the Chesapeake Bay.
Okay.
These are in the Atlantic Ocean.
See, those of us from the city have no idea. I mean, I'm glad you told me that.
Well, apparently, nobody knows anything about fishing. I've learned from this because they're just amazed at how hard they work, what they do, how dangerous it is, and what the government's doing to them. I get people tell me all the time, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. So how about a couple stories, and then we'll talk about the fishing industry.
Oh, gee. Well, yesterday he came back from Wachapreague. He's got sea bass pots, and they're about 20 miles off. And he has them off Maryland and Ocean City and off Wachapreague, Virginia, if you can call that off, which is about 20, 30 miles from either place. And the quota this year is, his is down to 11,000 pounds he can land in Maryland, and 1,500 he can land in Virginia, which is not a living. That doesn't even pay for the equipment, but it's been higher at other times. And of course, when he started, there were no quotas or minimum fish sizes or anything. You could land what you wanted, and you could make a decent living. Now, nobody can make a living with sea bass. They have to do other things as well. But anyway, he went down off Wachapreague, and a friend there lets him tie his boat up. So he tended his pots. He went into the port with the catch and slept in the boat overnight. And the next day, he packed out his fish. The dealers from Ocean City, because there aren't that many dealers left either, and he drove a truck down there to pick them up. Well, there are some millionaires in Wachapreague, of all places, and one of them lets him tie his boat there, and another one invited him to his house for dinner. Of course, Tommy just happened to have some lobsters, so that made for a really great dinner, but they had all sorts of other great stuff. So this was great because Tommy doesn't have a place to stay. He's just living on the boat. The guy offered him a bedroom and used the bathroom and everything. And they were really nice, and they had a great dinner. The only thing is that Tommy stayed up a little late, which he usually goes to bed around 7.
At night?
Yes,
that early?
because he has to get up it varies, anywhere from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. So he was a little tired the next day when he got in because he had to take the boat back to Ocean City. But
So your book talks a lot about the experiences that he has had, and you've incorporated that along with your feelings into this story. So tell me about the story. Who is the main character in this, and kind of like how it goes along plot line?
well, actually, I try to keep my feelings out of it. I don't really go for a lot of emotionalism. It turns me off. And this book, most of the people that have enjoyed it are men. They like this sort of thing. They like thrillers and outdoor stories. And they're not going to go for a lot of sobby emotionalism. So when I tell a tragic story about somebody, dying of hypothermia because their boat sinks, I just state the facts. No sobbing and all that. That's tragic enough. You can put your own emotions into it. The hilarious stories, well, it's just one after another sometimes. And fishermen have about the best sense of humor in the world, I think. They'd have to survive this horrible occupation. To me, it's horrible. They love it. And the main character, of course, is my husband. He started out working in the Atlantic Ocean when he was 8 years old. His mother was divorced, and they spent the summer in Indian River. And she'd drive clear to New Jersey for work every day, so he spent a lot of time outside. And a man there had a dive boat. So he said, "Tommy, you want to come work on my dive boat? You can scrub it up when we come in and everything, watch the divers." Oh boy, So he went out there, and for 3 summers in a row, he was seasick every day of his life. But he just fell in love with it. And old Captain Bob taught him how to navigate by dead reckoning and everything. And he loved it to death. And since he was very poor in school, he's attention deficient, he quit school when he was 16, went to Bob. They went mackerel fishing that spring, chartering. And then they got a job on a sea bass boat. And he was like, "These people are crazy. This work is just horrible work. It's hard. You have to lift these heavy wooden pots and pick out the fish. You're gone for 12 hours. And he fell in love with that too. He's just a masochist. So it goes on from there. He worked for the Italian Stallion, who was a notorious man, a woman chaser, a filthy mouth, but probably one of the best fishermen on the East Coast. The man just knew how to build the pots and catch sea bass. He was an expert on it. His boat was immaculate. He built one boat after another. And he's just a terrific character and entertaining, but an awful person to work for. So that's part of the story. And then it goes on how Tommy gradually worked up to where he had his own boat. He started out with, as he put it, a cracker box, had a Briggs & Stratton engine, and he worked up till he has the boat he has now, which is a 35-foot Novi. But he's done it all himself. He's never had any help from anybody except the help he has in the sense that the Italian Stallion taught him how to fish. And people taught him how to navigate. But as far as the money and everything, he's earned every cent of it.
I'll bet he has. So the character then is your husband in the book. Have you tried to disguise his character, or?
There wasn't any point in that. He's known up and down the coast. And I just use his first name, and he's known from Nova Scotia to Florida. And in fact, the fishing community is like that. Everybody knows everybody. And I did disguise some names with some characters who were not the nicest people in the world. But even everybody knows who they are in the fishing community, unfortunately. And I wanted to tell the truth. This was one of the hard things about writing the book. I stopped writing and said, I can't do this. It has real people in it. They're going to get mad, but I'm telling the truth. And sometimes when you tell the truth about people, you have to leave a lot out, and it still sounds bad.
So were you fearful of liability problems? Slander?
To some extent, but like I say, being in the writers group, my friends gave me information and books to read on these matters, and it was very reassuring. As long as you tell the truth and don't use somebody's name and don't lie about anybody or make up stuff, you're safe. Because these people, no lawyer's going to take their case, put it that way.
So tell me this now, you're writing about this character named, is he named Tommy? Mm-hmm. Who is your husband. Were you able to treat him as any other character in a novel? For example, give him faults, give him problems, show him three-dimensionally, not just...
Oh, he's very eager to point out to people, she picks on me too. It has his faults. He loses his temper. He cusses out Louis and all this stuff. Yes, it's all in there because I wanted an honest book about what really happens. And, you know, it has different dimensions, which was another tricky thing for me. And first I want to tell the stories of the fishermen, these life histories and the things that happen, but then there's what the government's doing to them. And I want to record the history of fishing because nobody else has done it. Nobody's written about these people out of Ocean City. Nobody knows.
Let's talk a little bit about that. In this book, you were also trying to capture pretty much the demise of the fishermen, especially here on the Eastern Shore. Why is that happening?
The government. And at first we didn't know. They thought, you know, they were sincerely trying to save fish. But, well, here's an example. Maryland put in a moratorium on rockfish. My husband had a rockfish license. Well, they had not been catching a lot of rockfish. They never caught a lot of rockfish out of Ocean City because they weren't targeted. But my husband was a gill netter, so he was targeting rockfish. Well, since they couldn't land it because of the moratorium, he went shad fishing. There were like 2 shad fishers in Ocean City that year, which is about all they had. Well, usually when you gill net, the net is sized for the fish you target. So you won't catch fish you don't want. Mm-hmm. If you're, say, catching bunkers, you have a small mesh. And you won't catch much but bunkers. And if you want rockfish and shad, you have a larger mesh. Well, he targeted shad. Unfortunately, rockfish go in shad nets. The year of the moratorium, he caught an incredible amount of rockfish and had to throw everyone overboard. He never saw so many rockfish. These fish were supposed to be scarce. No, you know, that's why they had the moratorium. They're overfished. There aren't any. He just threw so many rockfish overboard, he gave up trying to shad fish. He just stopped. He couldn't do it. All he was catching was rockfish. And it's been that way ever since.
So then how do the regulations fit into all of this?
Well, like I said, they closed rockfish when there were plenty of rockfish, but they said there weren't. So the science is either biased or it's not accurate. And why is that? It's because, well, the scientists are trying to please their bosses. Their bosses are the bureaucrats in the Fisheries Service. The bureaucrats are trying to please their bosses. Their bosses are like the legislatures in states and Congress. Who's Congress trying to please? The lobbyists. Who are the lobbyists? Sport fishing groups and environmentalists. And how do they make money? By building up crises to collect money and then lobbying Congress to make laws, say, we got this law passed to save the fish. But the fish weren't in trouble. The rockfish weren't in trouble. It was all a hoax. The other day, a marine biologist talked to Tommy. He's been the fisheries observer this summer, or last summer and this year. And he goes on the boats and collects data and gives it to the Marine Fisheries Service. He says he's quitting. He can't stand it anymore. He says, I collect data, I do the best I can, I give it to my bosses, they distort it.
So do you think in the book that you portray the fisherman's life as it truly exists? Because it's very difficult sometimes to take reality and put it into a literary art form. But do you think you've captured that?
Yes, as well as it can be captured. Like when my husband says the ocean was like a washing machine today, I put it in the book. The waves are going all which ways, just like a washing machine.
Did you have any trouble at all with, I would find it very difficult for me if I put my husband in a book and he was a true character without disguising him or giving him a different function, because a good writer has to find the flaws and the faults of the main character. They have to make them three-dimensional.
Okay,
So
I'm going to stop for a second. Beverly, is this a fiction work or is this more or less?
Nonfiction. It's true.
okay,
Okay.
but even in nonfiction, you take some liberties.
Okay, I'm sorry, Johnny, if you want to restart that question.
Okay. Sometimes it's very difficult to take a real person who you know personally and are close to, and to put them in a book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, for fear that maybe they will be upset because you're showing sides of them that are the private sides of them. You have to do that with characters to give them three-dimensionality. Did you have any problems with that?
Oddly, no, because my husband is just a very blunt, honest person, and he knows his faults. He readily admits his faults. He doesn't have a problem with that. He has enough confidence in his good traits to feel like, you're putting everything about me, fine. You put the good stuff too. He's confident. And besides that, like I said, I kept journals all these years. I always put whatever I felt like about people in them. So I'm used to writing what people are and not making up stuff or distorting things. And the ideal thing about writing about my husband is I didn't have to get written permission. I can use his photographs without permission.
Unless he divorces you, then you have a problem. But tell me about journaling. I tell all would-be writers, and I still do it. I have 18 published books. I still journal every single day. Why is journaling important?
Because, like I said, you can't always tell people what you think of them, but you can write it down. It really is a relief. If somebody makes you angry, write it down. Or if you have something that upsets you, you can work it out on paper and plan things on paper and just record things that you want to be able to go back and read later, like these funny stories and other things.
So it's record keeping as well.
Yes, it's a combination of things.
I try in my journals to bring in the surroundings of the period, like what our era is and what is going on in our era, such as right now, the financial crisis, etc. Do you do that with your writing?
Oh, yeah, because I have friends that don't share my political views, and I offend them enough, so sometimes I just write the stuff down in my journal, what I like and dislike about politicians and the administration, and that way I am relieved of some of the temptation to spout it out when I shouldn't.
Well, I think journaling is extremely important to a writer. Besides this book, have you published other ones?
No, this is my first and only.
And when did it come out?
Last November. How's
it doing?
Fairly well. It's beat the average, which I think the average book sells less than 100 copies. But it's doing pretty well considering I have no distributor, and my publisher is a small local publisher and not one of the big wigs. And of course, I'm not a celebrity. I don't even like to have my picture taken. But I feel like the cause is worth it.
Are you going to be working on something else now, or just spending your time promoting this particular project?
Well, besides promoting this book as much as I can, I'm also an artist, and I also have my new website with a partner that I've been working on stuff for that, the Nothing Store, and that's a lot of fun. So I always have a lot of things going on, besides the gardening and everything like that.
So you write and you paint, draw, so you do a variety of different art forms.
Yes, I get bored.
What is your favorite?
I don't have a favorite. It depends on what mood I'm in.
Do you have any ideas for a new book?
Well, I have a couple of ideas. This has been rather challenging distributing this one and promoting it. I've had a lot of people say, well, when's the next one? And you're going to write the sequel, aren't you? And I said, well, if I sell enough of this one, and my publisher wants to publish it, but right now I'm not really in the mood yet, not ready to take that on.
I think that people don't understand writers do have to be in the presence of mind to work on something. It just doesn't, you can't force it, it has to happen. But all the time writers are really writing in their minds, in their heads, and it's a matter of some point transferring what is up here to paper.
Oh yeah, well, I still keep my journal, of course.
When this book came out and you first read it, and you know, as a writer, you read it so many different times, you proofread it so many different times, but still there's nothing like that when it actually comes off the press and you look at it. Were you satisfied with how the story developed then?
Oh yeah, of course at that point I'd forgotten how many times I'd read over it looking for errors and trying to clarify things. I had Ann Foley as an editor. I thought I had a really good manuscript. I said, this is ready to go. And I sent it to Ann, and she said, that's not ready to go. It needs a lot of work, and it did. And I think we went over it 5 or 6 times after that. Not just grammatical errors, but she not knowing that much about fishing, I had to rewrite stuff several times. Finally, it got to the point, she said, I rewritten explaining the regulatory apparatus to her so many times. She said, I still do not understand. She said, maybe I'm dumb, but I just do not understand this. I said, but they expect fishermen to. So I put it in an appendix.
Oh, that was a good idea. I find for myself, I have to spend a lot of time rewriting. What people don't understand, putting it down the first time is not writing. Writing is in the reshaping, the remolding. It's the rewriting over and over and over again. I'm working on my 19th book, and it's taken me 6 years, and it's still not there.
Yes, that's another reason why I'm not in a hurry to start another. And this one probably, you know, even after I had all the journals collected that I wanted to use, probably took me 3 years of organizing and
Researching.
Well, I kind of had that done. Then the stops from fear, and then the editing, and then looking for better words, replacing words. And the thing you pointed at the first day I was at the writer's block was not using so many passive words, passive verbs, so using more active verbs. That was very important because most of my readers are fishermen. They have very short attention spans. They're used to active, exciting lives. For some of them, this is the first book they've read. So I said, I'm writing this with attention-deficient people in mind. It's got to move. It's got to be exciting. So I picked through all the words, and anytime I used a lot of was's and other passive verbs, I said, what can I replace them with? And I learned that from you.
Oh, thank you.
And trying to get more colorful descriptions, and without being boring and wordy with the descriptions, because believe me, my fishermen don't like to read wordy descriptions.
And you know what? They're not the only ones. The trend has been for several years now that it should be minimalistic writing. You say the most you can with the least amount of words, and you move it. You keep the story moving constantly. And you don't slow them down like Faulkner used to do. Do you remember that? Where they give these long, flowery, descriptive passages?
Dickens and Joseph Conrad, they're 2 of my favorite authors, but they would not succeed today. They're too wordy. They have these long, florid descriptions, which I love them, but...
Well, Beverly, thank you so much for being here with me. You've been a wonderful guest.
Oh, is that it? Okay, well, I want to warn the watchers that there's no cosmetologist working here and no teleprompter, and I was very disappointed. We just did this like a regular conversation. And I'd also like to warn people that if the government regulates the rest of the industries like it has commercial fishing, it will destroy them.
Right, thank you all for watching The Right Stuff, sponsored by the Writer's Block, and certainly through the generosity of PAC 14, your public access station.
Would you like to see your community organization or nonprofit group featured on PAC 14? To get started, contact us at 410-677-5014 or visit our website at www.pac14.org. PAC 14 is a great way to connect with your community.